Hey everyone, this is Dr. Kanita on another episode of Arya Holistic Healthcast. And I'm here with my good friend Wesley Tasker. So I'm gonna totally just read off his bio because it's super impressive. Um, so I mentioned Wes a while back in my podcast with Bryan Isacks, where we were talked about how much he trains. So Wes has been practicing martial arts since 1981, concentrating right now on Xingyiquan, Baguazhang, and Qilinpai, while also training in boxing, catch wrestling, and Pekiti, Tirsia, Kali. He's been studying Chinese medicine since 2004 with a focus on traumatology, orthopedics, and martial arts training medicine. And I know that recently he's been studying classical Chinese language and Neidan. So, Wes, welcome to my
Thank you very
podcast. I
much.
know we were kind of talking about bringing you on for a little bit. And just so you know, me and Wes talk like every day because we just talk about random stuff, mostly Chinese medicine. Um, but yeah, so Wes, tell us your journey with the medicine, how you got into it, or how you started with your martial arts career.
Well, like you mentioned, I started in the early '80s with a kind of just a generic kempo style, and through some good luck, which I've I've been very fortunate to have throughout my martial study, I met a classical system that had a small healing component to it. So when I was in middle school, I actually started to learn what in the Japanese art is taisei or honesei, which was bone setting, and some massage, some rudimentary moxie and emergency treatment. That piqued my interest, and in high school, I tried to read about Chinese medicine. My mom was seeing an acupuncturist. I used to really annoy him with questions. So yeah, so this interest in the medicine kind of started early. So
Yes, awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, and I know that me and Wes actually met during what's called Zang Fu Tui Na. So it's like Chinese medicine or traditional Chinese medicine, organ regulation, and your teacher or our teacher was teaching us a Tom
Mm.
Bisio, who he has written several books like Tooth from a Tiger's Mouth, which I have referenced a lot, and there's so many other books like the Zhang Fu, all the good stuff that I kind of use with in my clinic and stuff. But I also know that you own like a martial arts school, right?
Yeah, the Somerville Martial Arts Institute, where I teach Baguazhang, Xingyiquan, Qilinpai, Pekiti, Tirsia, and yeah, and I also some basic dieta shangke, like the kung fu hip medicine courses as well for my students, because that's, as you know, that's valuable. Um, so yeah, and as a side note, when you said tooth and the volume 2 being a pearl from the dragon's neck is
Yes.
equally indispensable.
Yes. I have those. I think they're in my clinic actually, or else I would show those.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, what was I gonna say? Yeah, so with I know we kind of talk about this a lot, and I talk about with my people, probably your students too, with like the lifestyle or
Hmm.
the philosophy of Chinese medicine, but also like the martial arts. It's not always about fighting, even though that's really fun. That's
Hmm.
really fun hitting
Yeah.
people, beating up
Yeah.
people for stress relief. But there's also like an underlying philosophy of martial arts, especially the ones that are
Hmm.
also, I don't want to say it's controversial, but it's like a whole complete system with that we talk about.
Hmm.
Like this in martial arts, it's not just like, oh, martial fighting, it's also the medicine, and like you said, the traumatology. Like you got to be able to help your students get better if they get hurt,
Hmm.
because inevitably you kind of get hurt when you train.
Hmm.
That's just part of it. um, but also like the mindfulness and how do you conduct yourself. But what has like been kind of like your favorite? I know you do a lot of stuff, but like your favorite in terms of a complete medical system of martial arts that you like.
Well, I'm kind of biased in the sense that I met Tom in 2004, learning Tui Na, and at the time Frank Butler, and then 2006 was a friend of mine and I could study Xingyiquan with him. Um, um, he said sure, which was again, there's that luck again, and it was just amazing because the style of Xingyiquan that Tom teaches is not. It's from Shanxi. It's not this kind of most of what you see as the Hebei type Xingyi. So I really didn't know how profound of a body method it was going to stung. And then having Tom as a teacher, obviously you have access to the medicine, and then Xingyi itself being based on Chinese medicine theory, and the particular style that he does has these exercises that are rooted in not only in Chinese medicine, but the eating, the muscle tendon change classic, the bone marrow classic, and some Neidan or internal alchemy. So it's this access to this kind of panoply of studies that aren't just about how to hit somebody harder.
Yes.
As attractive as that is sometimes.
Most people are like, how can I hit people harder and not look it?
Right. And as you know too, that body method is so important for body work, bone setting, and things like that. So
mm-hmm.
It's all.
I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I remember Tom on a podcast had said about the capital O one thing, and it's this kind of thread that when somebody looks and says, "Oh, you study Chinese medicine, martial arts, Chinese language, Taoism, internal, and all this seems like this, disparate stuff, but it's actually not.
It's all kind of connected, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's one thing I really enjoy about. One of the many things I really enjoy about the internal arts that I've been exposed to, being Xingyiquan and Baguazhang, is that they're just part of this one thing, and to be able to go in depth with that and contemplative is not it's not like I'm learning I don't know, like Swedish massage and then Muay Thai and BJJ, doing studying Greek and Aramaic or something separate, but with that playing classical Chinese worldview and philosophy, it's all part of the same thing.
And that, I feel, is very powerful in terms of someone wanting to kind of like help themselves feel better too, right? Or like I know there's the medicine, the healing arts, but you talked about the internal alchemy. So how would, to a lay person, kind of explain that? Or it's hard because like I understand what you mean, but to someone like, what do you mean by that? Like changing, how can martial arts kind of change my body and help me heal? So what would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say there's if I turn on a couple levels to it. I just want first one, which isn't Neidan, is this idea of the metaphor of alchemy or change, sense of these internal arts are meant, you're supposed to be able to do them into your 60s, 70s, and 80s. I know a lot of footage of teacher Li Guichang, he's in his 70s, and it's just, I can't move now. It's so it's this way of changing not only the body idea, this idea of more and health, but also how you generate power. So it's not about how much you can bench or how many push-ups you can do or tightening the body, but rather this loosening of it so that the qi and the blood can flow. And you're moving from the Dantian in this kind of whole body way. So there's that kind of alchemical change. And then oftentimes some people in the internal arts take the more meditative alchemy metaphors and compare them to martial arts. But ultimately, the idea of the internal alchemy that from a Taoist contemplative view is about accessing the inherent energies of the body and kind of reverse normal aging process. By immortality, I think they don't mean that you're going to live forever, but rather just be able to extend your life. Trying to reverse that process of aging, so to speak, with the Jing, the Qi, and the Shen, right, or the essence, energy, and spirit. I'm new to this, so I've been able to learn about it in these past couple of years from a fellow named Robert Coons, who has just an amazing courses and a Substack mortality study. That's just if anybody's ever interested in this kind of thing, he's definitely a wonderful resource.
Yeah, I think I have this great fascination too with, I won't really say immortality, but just how can in this day and age kind of like age well, right? And I always I'm sure you hear this all the time too, like I get frustrated with even some of my friends or people who are like, oh, I'm just too old, or like I'm hurting, like it sucks to get old. And I honestly hate that phrase because I'm like, you don't have to feel this way, or I know your body ages, so you have to change a way. Like, as you know, you training, you did like I know Wes just did like a catch wrestling camp, and he was like all these 20-year-olds, but he was rolling with them, and he can like he can still hold his own and probably beat them up. I mean, I definitely want Wes on my team. And then for me, I can play like 3 to 4 hours of tennis, and I know I need to do certain things so that. And you reminded me too. You're like, Kadia, you can take these like herbal pills. Like, oh yeah, duh. I had them like literally right next to me. I was like, oh, why didn't I take those? I'm so silly. So there are certain things that our body does age, but how do you kind of work with your own internal alchemy, your Jing, your Qi, and your Shen, so that it functions optimally, so that like you say, your teacher that's 70 something, and I have patients who are 74 still playing pickleball, really active, and that's that's a fun way to live, not bedridden or like having to need help with stuff. I mean, that kind of just sucks, especially if you're retired and you're like spending all your retirement time seeing doctors. I think that's not really fun to me.
No, it was really funny because so when I started studying the medicine, right, it's 2004. I was in my early 30s, and I forget which level of Tui Na they were teaching, but each level has its own qigong set, whether it's the 5 elements or Tiangan or whatever. But teaching this yin, and I hated it. Like, I'm sitting here, rubbing these points, face, doing this kind of stuff. I just didn't have the patience for it. So, I learned it during the course, and then was like, all right, I'm not doing that again. And then fast couple years, I'm studying Shingi with Tom. We're becoming more friends, and I said, hey, I know you teach this huge variety of qigong secrets, but like, what's your practice? What's your actual practice? And he wakes up and does Daoyin. I'm like,
yes.
So then I just started. Then I just started incorporating. I'm like, wow, this feels great. All right, I think I get it. It's like, it's not all about, because at a certain age, like, I often think when I was in my 20s and I was really after like some fighting and like,
oh yeah, I mean, we're all like that. We're like, we're invincible.
Yeah. I think if I other results of Shingi, the way and Bagua, that I would have been fascinated, but I don't think I would have done process. Like, you want how long still? Oh no, But then
Yeah.
once you recognize it and do it, it's like you said. I really like that idea about like aging well. It's like it's these didn't come out of nowhere. These practices, right? They've been worked on and elaborated on for of years. So there's something to them. And when you see somebody in their 60s who's just very pliable, they can move really well and generate still a lot of power, and they're healthy and engaged. It's like oh, I'm to this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's why I'm a firm believer. Like, if you do these things, and I have the benefit of having you as a friend too, and like you're like, I'm like, Wes, what should I do? And he also bothers me to do my Baguazhang, which it's always an ongoing process because I'm at this age, right? And Tom talks about it in the Bhagwa book too, the training book, where it's like, yeah, in your 30s, you're like, I don't have time. We're doing all these things and work. And that's when we have kids too. And it's like harder to retain like a chi cultivating practice in my age too. And I'm trying super hard, but
yeah,
and you're a good influence because you're like, Kanita, did you do your thing today? I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go do it now. So like you're in my head all the time to like do mud stepping, and I hate standing so much. And like the same way like you hated the Dao Yin, but it's like the best thing you can do for yourself, and I hate it so much.
yeah. I hear you.
Yeah. And there's that aspect of we talked about this too I talk with many of my people that come on here with like the nutrition part. And recently, right, I told you I went dairy free and gluten free, and that has made a tremendous difference in terms of energy level, where it's like, oh great, now I have the energy to do my qigong and do my exercise and study the way I want to. But sometimes having all those pieces at the same time is the hardest part. It's like, oh, you're
No,
doing really
yeah.
good in one, and then you're like, oh, I'm eating like crap. Oh, I'm not sleeping.
Those two are my biggest struggles: is
Yes.
the sleep and the food.
It's hard though. I totally get it. It's like I tell my patients, like, just do one thing at a time, and don't cut cold turkey or don't like change so much at once, because then most of them feel overwhelmed and stuff. So yeah, it's just like baby steps, but I can bother you
Yeah,
about
it's
that
like
too.
yeah, that's true. Did you eat well? Oh, darn it.
Did you drink water?
No, it's that's the one thing I really appreciate too about that kind of classical Chinese view. It's the internal arts or the medicine or the body work, is that idea of that kind of zhong, right? That equilibrium, that middle part. Like, you don't need to drop everything. It's consistency, little things over time, or the avoidance of extremes, which I might have a problem with, but I'm getting better.
I think like me and you are the same, as like we're super extreme. So
Yeah,
our problem is the zhong is like the moderation.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
That's a good point. Yeah.
yeah. Well, that was the amazing thing about Tom's seasonal book,
Yes.
right? It's just all these wonders that to keep you in harmony, and your harmony with the seasons, that when you really look at it, what is it? 10 minutes of Dao Yin, maybe adding some herbs for tea for that node of the season. I mean, it's not that bad, but the yield is great. It's much healthier and much more.
Yeah. I was good with that for like a couple months, and again, all you have to do is just get back on the horse, right?
Yep.
There's no too late. And I think
No.
in his book too, in Tom's book, he's like, honestly, you can start when you're 50 years old, and you will still get amazing benefits if you study and and almost like you have more time, right? At that point of your life,
Mm-hmm.
you're like, your kids are grown up, like close to, you know, kind of settled, so you have more time to do those things. So again, I tell people it's like never too late to start
Mm-hmm.
these things. You don't have to, it's not like hardcore martial arts. You have to fight and train. And I've seen that
Mm.
extreme when people start. They're like, I want to lose weight, I want to do that stuff, and they go into these like really really hard sports, and I'm like, uh
Yeah.
you need a balance too of the the qigong, the qi cultivation things.
Yeah.
And you probably in your martial arts school, you probably see a lot of this too, right? Like what's kind of like the way you teach your students, you teaching them the qi cultivation stuff first. I think you
Yeah.
mentioned
So
this to me.
when I mean, first of all, currently I don't teach publicly. I just
Mm-hmm.
teach private. So the and because it's out of my house, if somebody wants to study with me, they email me, and if I don't meet them for coffee somewhere, and we just talk
Mm-hmm.
about things are uh, I can get a feel for them, but also equally as important, they can get a feel for me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
is is this art right for me? And the art might be right, but they might not connect with the way I teach. So it's good to suss that out. And because they're going to be coming to my house, have to get to know them a little bit. But then I tell them, like, all right, this is the curriculum. This is how things are going to and it's going to be probably a little low and in the beginning, and maybe slightly boring.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
you've got to build that kung fu body, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to stand. You've got to do these fundamental, and then once that's in place, then we can start with some more martial stuff or forms or things like that. But both Shingi and Bagua have a pretty solid set of fundamental Neigong that you've got to get down first. Otherwise, I don't care how many forms you know. If like in Bagua, you can know all the cool linking forms, but if you're not mud stepping, if you're not connecting at the end, you're not doing Bagua.
Mm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
You're just doing forms. Same thing. If you're not doing the fundamental breathing exercises, the standing in Santi, the slow Pichuan, if you're not cultivating that reason it's called an internal art, then I don't care how many forms you know, Xingyi.
Mm. Yeah, it almost
So
becomes just like a what do you call it? Outer shell, empty with
yeah,
nothing inside.
empty. Yeah, yeah, exactly. You know,
Yeah.
so
No
I'm pretty.
substance, no substance inside. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so and then with Bagua, the thing is it's got a wide enough set of fundamental Neigong. Like for example, years ago I had a guy who he was a Muay Thai coach. So he did Muay Thai a long time, and then he was coach. He needed to stand, so
Mm.
we focused on Zhang, the Xia Zhang, the 12 connecting postures, just to
Mm.
kind of get his body used to that. I had another student who started Bagua almost at the same time, who didn't do much before, so they started on the 28 Jibengong to open the
Mm.
body up because they needed activity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice that you can oh, you've got this going on, so I'll start you here.
Mm-hmm.
Got that going on, I'll start you there. And if they'll meet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I needed the slow exercises and
Yeah.
the standing.
Yeah. With Xingyi Bagua, so there's three Neigong things that you have to do. So here they are.
People are like, how do I get better? You stand.
Stand. Yeah. Yeah, but stand. Yeah, but stand.
You're like, but I don't want to. No, you got to stand. They're like, oh, darn.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's really cool that, depending on the student and knowing it's just like Chinese medicine, it's like
Mm.
not we treat this and so we throw the same thing at it, but like, oh, okay, like you need to stand more, you need to move around, open your body, You need to, be more yin versus being more yang, and you have that in the different forms, like Bagua, Shingi. So that's really cool. That it's almost like that's their treatment protocol in a way
Yeah.
for the body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really doing a diagnosis. All right. Where do we need to start? Yeah.
No, that's really cool. And I'm sure like once they get past that part, it's like now you get into, the sparring and application of stuff. And I know I've seen Wes do it, and it's like so much fun too. And he does, he doesn't hurt me, but I could tell. I was like, oh man, I could like literally feel. And like Bryan had done this to me, because I just want to feel like in terms of like what it feels like to have my root moved, or like have your
Hmm.
Dantian like totally uprooted, and it's like super fun to get just thrown. You're just like, oh,
Hmm.
this is how it feels, like almost like Shingi feels like a sledgehammer and it's coming
Yeah.
down at you. It's really, and
Yep.
then bhagwa feels like you're going in circles. You're like, how? Like you're just going the wrong way. That's how it feels like.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Good metaphor for it.
yeah, and obviously, and then like tai chi feels like you're just moving into empty space. Or, you're also kind of just what do you call it, like moving in the wrong direction. So it's like it's really cool to kind of feel yourself with minimal effort on your part, or just being able to align yourself well and knowing the correct like breathing and all this stuff that you can easily just uproot. It doesn't matter how big you are too. It's just like I mean, you've seen Tom do it. You've seen really good teachers do it, and they'll
Mhm.
just like move big guys like they're a feather. Like that's
Yep.
how powerful it can be.
Oh
um
yeah. Oh yeah. No, for sure. And it's funny because the style of Xingyi, the Shanxi Xingyi that Tom does, it's one of the best examples seen of the quote steel wrapped in cotton,
mm,
where like everybody you see a lot of Xingyi and you think it's this, not you personally, but people tend to think it's this aggressive, just going through you, and for sure our style of Xingyi can do that, but there's this to it too, this yieldingness to it
mm-hmm.
that's really unique. And so pushing hands with Tom, you can get definitely uprooted and driven through, um, or sometimes you're pushing, and then he kind of disappears in front of you, like there's nothing to push, but he's
Mm-hmm.
still. It's like, oh, this is not going to end well.
I know that's something in your gut. You're like, oh god.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I felt that do that to me one time. You were doing like it was like this movement, and
Hmm.
and then he's like, yeah, and like you can do it martially, and I was like, whoa, like I was just like flew back, like it was the weirdest thing ever.
Yeah.
Just him doing like a circling movement, like totally made me kind of like, like I couldn't even control it. I just like totally fell backwards. It was so weird.
Yeah. And that's the kind of project I've had for a while, is
Mm,
like I love catch wrestling for what it is, but
mhm,
also can I use this internal connection, stress? Can I lose this kind of Dantian driven movement while grappling with somebody who's not cooperating and wants to throw me on my head or crank my arms or neck or whatever? And so it's been kind of interesting from that point of view too.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, have you? I feel like I don't quite know what catch wrestling. I mean, I can kind of imagine, but I've seen videos of you do it, but
Mhm.
like especially in different positions, do you feel like with your dantian, you have to learn how to breathe in those positions too, which is very difficult. I know, like
Yeah. No, for
jujitsu,
sure.
they have you do that, like they have you like sit in a position to try to breathe.
Hmm.
Um, have you found it still very useful in those situations, just knowing where your dantian is and like how you can move?
Super useful. and like, because especially in the style of catch that I do, it's very much into in pinning or in a ground position, that they seek to like do rides where they're driving their weight into your ribs or into your diaphragm, or can you carry, so it can be unpleasant to be you know in one of those positions. But I find being able to keep the dantian open, do the kidney breathing, do the kind of spiraling up the that happens when you breathe, when you do kidney breathing or lower dantian breathing, to be unbelievably useful.
Yes, I bet, to generate the power. And in your school too, I'm sure during sparring or fighting that you do inevitably get hurt. So what's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like your go-to? We talked a little bit about this before too, like your go-to liniments, and every martial arts school kind of has their own recipe, as you know. We talk about it too.
Yeah,
Um, I
yeah.
pulled a lot
For
of my recipes too from Tooth from the Tiger's Mouth as well. But what do you use? What's your like most commonly seen injuries?
well, so for liniments, for acute thing, we have in my school we have three standard ones. There's the pretty neutral one from Tooth from the Tiger's Mouth. We have a very cooling one, that's an arm conditioning formula, but it's very cooling. Like it has like the three yellows in it. It has been so so it's moving, and then we have one that's super warming, which has a lot of your warming herbs, has a good chunk of African bird cayenne pepper in it, and it's a super interesting. You can actually feel it almost from the inside out.
Yes, I think this is the
Yes,
formula, the Hong Huo, right? Hong Huo.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah.
Yeah. So those are
So
our three kind of standard injury ones. As far as what we get for injury, a lot of like bruising, bone bruising, a lot of pulled stuff. Because I teach stick fighting, I've learned a lot about broken fingers. Not a lot, but it happens.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's, and then but when you have students and you get to know them, they're carrying around some chronics,
Yeah.
right? So then it's like, oh, and you the more like tendon liniment or the
Mm-hmm.
bone sinew gow or
Mm-hmm.
other things, and
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
What do you use for the broken fingers in that case? I know, but we could tell people that what you use.
Yeah. Well, so as far as herbal formulas go, there's the two-stage bone knitting powder, uh, that that's available through Tom's product line, and it's in the recipes of Tiger's Mouth. I
Mm-hmm.
I have another formula I got from another book that you can start taking right away from the bone break, and then you just keep taking till all healed.
Mm-hmm. Is that
Yeah.
that's not from Tom's
Gu-
book, is it? It's like
No, no, it's from a different source. It's a Gujuan or Gujotong technically. In the book, it's done as a um,
okay.
but I mean, it's got Gusui Bush. It's got the your
Bone.
typical,
Hmm.
let's for kidney.
Yes.
Yeah,
Bone knitting fun things
yeah.
to eat. Um,
So they're also good. The late stage bone knitting powder we found is really effective too for stretch leg. You get
mm,
you get enthusiastic about boxer. They're carrying some overuse injuries for their ligaments.
mhm,
We found those are really good too to help kind of tighten those
mm.
things up. So you teach people how to moxa themselves. And
Yes, now I feel like I'm trying to get back into moxibustion and to tell people what that is. Moxibustion is basically a burning of aya or Mugwort is the common name. Artesime, Folium artesime, and I'm butchering the Latin name, but um, it's basically a really warming herb that helps with pain, inflammation. You can actually use it a lot for fertility stuff too. And I know that the injury I got, like, was it 3 years ago now, when I dislocated my shoulder, and
Mm.
I moxed it um, with the belt, and using just like like direct moxa to help with the pain. And I realized, I was like, oh, moxa is really good for pain too. The only
Yeah.
problem is the smoke and the smell of it, because I had to tell
Hmm.
my people that, um, if you go back to work, don't tell them you did weed. It is not that. I have, yeah.
Yeah.
But I find it really useful for pain too, or yeah, that they can do at home as well.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Definitely. With that Kung Fu medicine that I know Tom taught for a while, and that I have an abridged version of it, but Mox is part of it because it's you can teach people to do, and from an orthopedic, it's valuable, and really
Mm,
powerful.
hmm
So
Um, have you done like cupping too? That helps.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely cupping. Sometimes just straight cupping, sliding cupping. Uh, depending on the nature of the swelling, you can do bleeding cupping.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
haven't done. I've done bleed cupping a couple times, and I know people are like, "Oh, that sounds kind of archaic." But if there's like a lot of, blood stagnation, and you see it, you can actually use bleed cupping on the back of the knees for severe low back pain. If you do see kind of like blood stasis points, or those purple veins and all that stuff, um, it's super useful. It's almost like
Mm,
allowing the blood to flow better, or getting like the stagnant blood out.
yeah,
Where people were like, "Oh my gosh, you do what?" I'm like, "Yeah, it actually does work. It's weird."
yeah. Oh, definitely. I'm like I can remember in the '80s. You can't wait to get the latest issue of like Inside or Black Bone. I don't even think these things exist anymore. And you would I would always, especially in Inside Kung Fu, you always see like people with like iron palm liniments, or this kind of the healing that taught along with the martial arts, and you'd read about like Wang Fei Hong, right, or Sun
Mm,
Wudang. They did the medicine and the martial arts, and then, but it was, at least for me, growing up in the suburbs doing martial arts, no access to this stuff.
mm-hmm,
It's the story that you can read about, but you can't get your hands on that kind of information, right? And then fast forward, you meet, Tom started some, and it's like, I'm now learning Twain on, and I've got all these liniments and all those for injuries, and you start doing them, and it's like,
mm-hmm,
a lot of times you just see that they work, like it's miraculous.
mm-hmm,
It's like, wow, this is impressive.
mm-hmm. And that's
uh,
the almost like the buy-in with the people. Like, they're like, "Oh my god, this Chinese medicine does work. It's not some weird voodoo thing." Although I have been called a witch sometimes, so there's
yeah.
we're just
No,
like, "What
I've had,
did you do?"
yeah. No, no, I've had to have started, and because the medicine's such a part of the culture in my school, like I don't have requirement that you learn it, but I've never needed it because eventually everybody wants to learn it. Um,
Mm-hmm,
but I've had
mm-hmm,
some people who, like, they either had no opinion about Chinese medicine, or they're kind of, I don't know, that doesn't work, or and then eventually they get a bruise, you give them a
mm-hmm,
liniment, they come back,
mm-hmm,
what is in that stuff? And then you start teaching them about how the liniments are made, and what
mm-hmm,
what the herbs do from a Chinese medicine, and they're a believer
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
because it works. I mean,
Yeah, especially the neutral, like the dit da jiao, dia da
mm,
jiao, depending Cantonese Mandarin translation is like, uh what's the direct translation? Like hit fall, liniment, something like
all hit,
that. Fall hit.
hit wine technically.
Oh, hit
Joel,
wine. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Joe's wine.
Yeah.
But that one's pretty miraculous because I've seen it. Like my patients, I have one she's a roller derby. They
Mm,
slam against each other. Their skates, she's been like kicked in the shins, or where like swells up. She stubbed her toe and she literally like has the dajao in her purse and at home because she's like, it works so well that she'll like rub it on right when it happens and the pain goes away really quickly. And then the next day it won't really bruise that much, or she has very minimal. She's like, yeah, before it would last like 2-3 weeks. But that's how powerful it is if you just get the right
mm,
herbs at that time. You have
mhm,
that on hand, then it can really help with the healing process and all that stuff. Especially, we talked about like you probably see a lot of like sprained ankles where it swells up. I
mhm.
see that all the time. And the first instinctual thing is to put ice on it. But we kind of know that saying that, and I said it in my social media, was like, ice is for dead people.
Dead people.
I don't know if Tom says it in the book, but he kind of talks about that too in terms of like the dam and the river. Like you don't want to clog that up with ice, but using our version of herbal ice, which is like a poultice of herbs that allow um, you put on and you wrap it, or you can put the detaja as well, but you have to just put it on immediately after. And you can
Mm,
even do acupressure points, right?
mhm.
To help with the swelling in that area. But it is pretty miraculous because the trauma medicine has
Yeah.
to be quick, has
Yep.
to work
Yep.
quick.
It's
Yeah.
funny. So when I started medicine before my son was born. So by the time I was old enough, we were going to playgrounds and parks and stuff. I had a little kid, Dieta Jo, Gao, Yunnan Baya for cuts, and I think then burn ointment just because.
Yes, the burn ointment's
Um,
really cool too. Yeah.
yeah, and I'll never forget. We were part of this big kind of play group, and he had he was playing tag with a bunch of kids, and he rolled his ankle, and I noticed it. He was far away, so I grabbed the kid, started meandering, but one of the other she came over with one of those kind of ice pack, like it, and you rub it, and it's cold.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've seen those.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So she hands it to my son, and he's like looking at it, what's for? Or she's like, you put it on your ankle. Why? Like he had no like he was looking at him like what? As
Hmm.
I meander over, like, yeah, we don't use that. Thank you. And she's like, you don't use this? And Smear's like, why would I put that on my ankle?
He's like, we don't do those things. Yeah,
And
it's
then
really fun.
in the ankle off, and I started putting the San Juan Gao, wrapping it and by this
Hmm.
point, a bunch of the parents are like, "What is that stuff?"
Yeah, teach them
Gave him
all
some
about
chili
Chinese.
san.
Yep, yep, yep. Yeah, I was like, oh my god, my kids are gonna grow up with such like Chinese medicine, a little bit of folk
Yeah,
medicine.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I grew up with my dad giving me like not like colloidal silver.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's more folk medicine esque,
yeah, yeah.
and honestly, it works. I don't know. It's weird. I grew up with it's for like anything. It's like stomach aches, all that stuff. I've never taken like Tums or stuff in my life. Actually, I
Mhm.
just grew up taking silver. So, and now my medicine cabinet is just full of like San Hangguao, Dita
Mhm.
Jiao,
Mhm.
Hong
Yep.
Hua Jiao,
Yeah.
Yunnan Bai, all this stuff where,
Yeah.
and even when I have colds, I have more Chinese herbal stuff for that.
Mhm.
Occasionally, I take some Western medicine, but just honestly, it's more for the sleep. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, but yeah, that's really funny though. That story. Samir's like, "What is? Why would I put that on my ankle? Why would I
Yeah.
put ice?"
Yeah. It was really like he had no idea because he grew up with San Juan Dietajo, or you get a cut, you put you on it.
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, I even found that there's a Chinese herb shop kind of town that I go to, and at one point I saw they had band-aids that had Yunnan Bayao.
What?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, 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 yeah. It was really. I'm like, ooh. Just ended up buying like a bunch of the boxes. So those are the band-aids we have around now.
That's hysterical. Oh my
They're
god, you
great.
didn't
They're
buy
great.
Yao band-aids?
Yeah, yeah, they're great.
Yeah. They did come out. I don't know if you saw this, like I think it was from Camwell. Um they had like a Yunan Bayao like spray, so I bought that
Oh,
because it's
huh.
so cool. Yeah. So they have like the plasters, which I've given out, which are really,
Hmm.
really helpful.
Yep,
Um,
it's really
and
good for
then
acute stuff. Yeah.
yeah, obviously the capsules, and then now they had
Hmm.
like a spray thing,
Hmm.
and so I actually gave it to one of my dancer patients because she
Hmm.
destroys her body
Yeah.
on a regular basis.
Yep.
I'm like, try this and let me know how it is.
Nice.
Yeah, it was almost like I want to see how it works with the aerosol and the that
Mm.
version. I don't know, but the band-aids,
Yeah.
I feel like that's awesome.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, they're great.
yeah, that's so cool. Um, so you have all that stuff in your martial arts school, teaching your students all
Hmm.
that good stuff. Do you hold any like meditation things with them or retreats? I know you're kind of like your background too in Buddhism, and we
Hmm.
spoke about that before. But how has that kind of helped you in your life?
Oh, immensely. Yeah. So I mean, having any kind of contactus, I think this helps way in the vicissitudes of life, right? I mean, it just
Hmm.
gives you a center. And again, because of it's still part of that one thing, right? You can see those
Hmm.
kind of contemplative ideas even in the internal arts or in the medicine. Um, and there's that interplay, like Neidan or internal out with Chinese medicine theory, with even influence from Buddhism, Tao She or Neo-Confucianism.
Hmm.
So the so it ties in.
Mm.
I generally, if a student's interested in that kind, I'll generally point to people who are experienced teachers of that stuff.
Hmm.
I hold training and meditation, and I'm very cautious about that because there's
Hmm.
just it's a lot,
Yeah, it
and
is. Yeah.
not a teacher in it, and I don't feel like I may have the skills to teach it. So I practice for sure,
Hmm.
but if I have a student who's interested, take them to more experienced people. I
Hmm. Hmm.
think the closest thing I teach is what's it called? Like Shintian, Zhengqi, like an exercise of sitting in quiet and trying to continue kidney breathing
Mm.
and in towards the Dantian and things. About as much as I'll ever show anybody.
Hmm.
So.
Hmm. I do think that the the qigong and the neigong also has like this integrated into it, the mindfulness.
Hmm.
I think that's almost like kind of my meditation because it's concentrating on what's happening internally, and of course
Hmm.
you're going to have your mind wander a lot.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
happens to me a lot as well when I do the qigong, even the mud stepping and concentrating. I'm like, oh, and then I think about dinner or something. I was like, oh wait, what's my foot doing? You
Yeah.
know. So cultivating that mindful movement too, and the neigong practices is really helpful. I think
Oh yeah, for sure.
a lot of times, you probably see it all the time with your students. In my patients, I tell them, being in the present moment or just taking time to do some breathing or even kidney breathing can just like recenter yourself and be like, okay, I don't need to be this irritated or angry,
Hmm.
or being aware of that is important, so you're not snapping at your kids or snapping at your
Yeah.
students or all this stuff.
Well, yeah, and if you too that there's tie-in with the medicine, right? Because they're those extreme emotions, but it's the chi moving in certain ways that aren't necessarily healthy. Whether it's
Hmm.
in fear, it drives it straight down. In anger, it floods up, right? So it's like, how can zhong, right? That equilibrium.
Hmm.
How can we keep that so we're not in an extreme, which is sustainable without
Hmm.
damage, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I love it. All
Mm.
this martially, the medicine,
Yeah.
the mindfulness of spirituality, and all that
That's
is
interesting.
connected into this whole philosophy of
Hmm.
Chinese medicine, which is endlessly fascinating to us. Um,
Yes.
and also practicing how to age well. I think that's all kind of connected.
Oh yeah.
But of course, we're kind of almost at the end of the hour.
Oh. Oh.
Um, and but we'll definitely have to talk about this another time too.
Mm.
But again, thank you, Wes, for coming on again and
Oh,
chatting
no
with
problem. No
me.
problem. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I super
Honored to be here.
appreciate it. Yeah. But yeah, so thank you everyone for listening. And if you want to ask any more questions about what we talked about, please feel free to email me or leave a comment below. But this would be an end on another episode. And I hope you guys will join me on my next episode. So hope you all have a great day. And thank you, Wes, again for joining me. He's awesome.
Thank
He
you.
inspired me.
Thank you.